Hey, it's Rabbi Shmuel Pollen. It's great to have you back with us. This is the Light Unto the Nations show, and our flagship book is All In for God. You want to be all in for God, don't you? Then you got to get the book. You got to go to allinforgod.com, allinforgod.com. We're going to get right into it. We're going to be talking about hell. And there's someone, a Talmudic sage named the Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Simon, the son of Yochai. And he said that he could get everyone off of hell. He could get them out of it. But he didn't say how he would do it. But I'm going to tell you how to actually do it. I'm going to tell you how, if you find yourself in a situation after you've died where you're going to be sent to hell, you can defend yourself and tell them that what they are doing is actually illegal according to Torah law, according to biblical law. Because if you spent most of your life chasing fame, the opposite sex, drugs, secular music, if you've ever cheated or lied, unfortunately, you're headed there to hell for a period of time unless you continue to watch this video. According to some rabbis, the fact that you suffered in this world wipes out the suffering of the next world. But according to other rabbis, nothing saves you from the verdict of hell. You are judged for every moment since you were conceived until that day. Who isn't afraid of hell? The ragged clothing, the fire, the heat, the caves. Well, it's not really like that, in truth. It's just separation from God, and some might call it a hot shower before you're ready to go into the banquet hall. But hot shower is putting it pretty mildly. It is pretty horrible, but it is the separation from God. One near-death experience person describes his experience of hell as billions of years of pain in 1 second. Every second is billions of years of pain. That's how bad it is. And he was going down a big tunnel, going down, further and further away from God. And that was causing him the pain. It's the separation from God that causes the pain. Here's the deal. Hashem, God, has to keep the Torah as well through this process. And we know this from a verse in Psalms, Magid Devarav Liyaakov Chukav Umishpatav Liyisrael. That means that God tells his word to Jacob and gives them his ordinances, emphasis on the his. They are ordinances that he has to keep and words that he has to keep as well. As the Medrash Shemais Rabbah 39 says, 30 verse 9, there are those who give commands to others to fulfill, but do not fulfill them themselves. However, what God commands to others to do, he fulfills himself, as the verse declares. He tells his words to Jacob and his statutes and his ordinances to Israel. Now, let's go into Torah law and see what law God is violating for sending people to hell. Number 1, it is forbidden to sell an item, whether movable or real estate, when the item is defective. If this is done without informing the buyer of the defect before he completes the purchase, the seller is perpetuating a fraud. That's Choshen Mishpat 228, verse 6. Chazal, the rabbis of blessed memory, teach us that Gnevas Das, to deceive someone mentally, is prohibited just as that of a fellow Jew. It applies equally to Gentiles. So this is for you. Hell is a fraud because you were taught through your life that your actions have certain consequences. Maybe a stubbed toe, maybe a car accident, or worse yet, a heart attack. But we are told that hell is well beyond any of the pain that you could have in this world. Every second is like a billion years of pain, according to that account. How can you apply one standard of punishment and tell them that these are the results they can expect, and then apply a completely different standard, which if they had known about that standard, they would have lived their lives quite differently. They've been deceived. There should be no surprises when it comes to the consequences of your actions. That's the whole point of this law. You should get what you ordered, not something much worse than what you ordered. So we were expecting to order and receive a certain thing, and we're receiving something far, far worse. That's called a mekas toos. It is a deceptive, mistaken transaction. And then we have the law of lesitein michshol lifnei iver. Do not put a stumbling block in front of the blind man. You cannot physically put a stumbling block in front of a blind man, and you cannot, like if somebody doesn't know about the stock market, try to sell him something that winds up, not working out for him. You cannot put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. You cannot take advantage of someone for what they don't know. And yet, God puts sin right in front of us. When we are unaware of the standard that we will be judged by, now they will likely say that we should have found out the standard and we should have found out what sin is really all about, to which you will say, how available was this information? A few near-death experience stories do not cut it. Nobody knows if those stories are reliable. Nobody knows the pain, what the pain is like, that it's years of pain for every second. It's not enough. God has put sin in front of us, and he knows that we're likely to fall into sin, and he's put it right in front of us, taking advantage of the fact that we are weak, taking advantage of the fact that we succumb to temptation. Now, we mentioned that the great Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, himself said he could get everyone out of hell. He's the reason I had the gall to make this video. Now let's go on, because this next this next law comes from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and it's called Davar she'eino miskaven, something that you didn't intend. So an example of this is you're not allowed to make a furrow in the ground, you're not allowed to make a tunnel in the ground on the Sabbath. But if you're bringing a bench, you're carrying a bench from one house to another, and you happen to make a furrow while you're doing that, you have not committed a sin for breaking the Sabbath. Because you did not intend to make a furrow, you intended to move the bench. So it's something which wasn't really your intent, you are not held responsible for. So was sin a real intent? We know with Joseph, it says that he saw the vision of his father in Potiphar's wife. Potiphar was trying to seduce him and was doing so day after day after day. And when Joseph was about to commit the sin, a vision of his father came through from Potiphar's wife, and he realized that they came from the same source in godliness. Everything has its source in godliness. And when God created the world, it says he broke the vessels. The vessels broke and they fell down into places of sin. So through sinning and repenting, you reveal godliness in that dark place. And that's what we really wanted. We really wanted the revelation of God in that dark place where it wasn't before. The next law that we can bring up is Tsar Balei Chayim. You cannot give unnecessary pain to an animal. We cannot allow any animal, even a fly, any more pain than necessary. How can we treat humans worse than a fly by giving them more pain than necessary? The next law is the law against embarrassment. We are told by many near-death experience people that they're shown a life review. There are very many important people in the audience, and everyone watches every second of their life, and it goes by in a flash. But every second that they're doing something wrong is extremely painful and extremely embarrassing because the important people are there in the audience. So what God is doing is he's violating the law against publicly embarrassing someone. In the Talmud, it says that he who publicly shames his neighbor is as though he had shed blood. And it would be better to throw oneself into a fiery furnace rather than to embarrass another. Rav Nachman agreed with this teaching that he heard and added a further explanation. At first, the face of the embarrassed person turns red, and then it turns white, indicating a form of bloodshed. You're moving the blood. Tosafos notes that the victim's face turns red since the person's blood gathers there in an attempt to flee from the body of the person. And one more law is the law of Tinuk Shenishba. It's a halacha, it's a Jewish law. And when it comes to any of the sins, if it was from a boy or someone who used to be a boy who was taken captive and not taught anything about God's wisdom or God's will, he is not held responsible for that. So how can you hold us responsible when we are all Tinuk Shenishbas? We are all children taken captive, because when we were even in the womb, we had an evil inclination which trapped us and deprived us of the true knowledge of God's will and God's wisdom. And we are all like children who are taken captive. Now, getting yourself out of hell using these techniques doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. First of all, they may knock down these arguments in ways that I didn't think of. God and his angels are pretty smart. But if you revolve your life around chasing the opposite sex and money and secular music and secular movies, you're probably headed for some kind of hell, and it's going to be pretty terrible. But let me tell you what the hell is all about, because it's more instructive and constructive than you think. There's a story of a man who had a legend that on a certain island, the sand was diamonds. You could become very rich there by collecting the sand. So he saved up all his life to go to that island, and he finally got there. And indeed, the sand was diamonds. So he started to hoard up as many diamonds as possible. Then, realizing that he was going to be there for a while, he decided that he was going to change currencies and start to live the way the people there lived. And their currency was pig fat. And he started a business and became the richest person on the island with pig fat. And since he was so rich, he decided to come back home with his loot that he had gained, and he shows his wife what he has gotten, and she just says, "What is that smell?" He looks back, looks at what he has brought, realizes he hasn't brought any diamonds, and he's just faints. And that's like the day of death, the fainting, when you wake up and you realize the real reality, and all the currencies changed, and you realize that the opposite sex and money, chasing after them, is going to stink up there. It's going to really, really stink up the place. And you will be desperately searching, like that man searched, for any diamonds that may have accidentally landed in his boat. And he found a few of them in his shoe, and he was able to live a modest life off of that. But you don't want to wake up and be in the next world and realize that you spent your whole life on the wrong currency. You want the currency to be God's wisdom and God's will, which is the commandments. If you're a Noahide, you want to study the 7 Noahide laws. If you're a Jew, you want to study the 613 laws. And you want to be on the right side of the currency. You don't want any shockers when you get to heaven or hell when you get to your court case. So I hope this information helps you win your court case. You should be able to beat hell with this information. And I hope you all go straight to heaven and have wonderful lives until you do. God bless.